Good morning, everyone. Welcome to WBBA-TV. My name is Alexis Holzer. I'm the Assistant Director for Economic Development at Washington State University. And this morning I have the pleasure of interviewing Jane Roskams, who is the Executive Director of Strategy and Alliance at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we'll just start out with very generally, tell me about your history with the Institute, what attracted you to this, and how you became the Executive Director.
Great. So I moved here in January. So I've only been here full-time for less than 6 months. But I had worked on consultation projects last year with the Institute. And before that, I'd been involved at different stages in the development of a couple of their atlases, consulting with them on their spinal cord atlas and their developing brain atlas, both of which related to areas of research from my own group at the time. So that was how I began to become familiar with the ins and outs of how the Allen Institute works. But in my field, pretty much everybody knows that the Allen Institute exists.
Right.
And people all over the world click online and use their tools on a daily basis. So the fact that they're here is known. What they're doing right now is a whole new ball game. So that was a big part of what attracted me here. I moved here from the University of British Columbia in Canada, where I was directing a fairly large research group and a center in brain repair, and could have stayed there. But what's happening at the Allen Institute right now, and at this moment in its evolution, really has the potential to impact neuroscience in numerous avenues, in a very, very big way, in a way that no individual research group could do. And they're doing that because of a fairly core philosophy of bringing very different people together with different skill sets and giving them very big problems to put their heads together and work. And they have to work together as a team. They have to be able to communicate their expertise to each other. And then we have to figure out how to make something out of that. So I'm a figure-outer. So if ever there was a job description for the kind of job that I have right now, I find solutions and I figure out how we get to put them in action, make things work.
Professional problem solver and collaborator.
Pretty much, and a little bit, yeah, definitely. Definitely the problem solver, and I would say a big part of the success of my own group over the last 15, 20 years has been a real willingness to openly collaborate with groups who are very different to ours and create a network that in its existence makes every single research problem that you tackle that bit stronger and more doable. And that's what we hope to do here.
So let's elaborate on that a little bit. Yesterday in the presentation that was given on the Institute, the mantra is team science, big science, open science.
Yep.
I particularly found the open science piece of it very interesting because there is so much data involved in solving these big problems. So given your title, Strategy and Alliance, can you elaborate on what that means to you and why that's so important?
Totally. So the Institute was founded initially on with the idea that we could create big data sets that we then make freely available to the world. So the atlases that the Institute originally began to generate were scale-up, essentially, models of things that were happening in labs around the world in very small ways. So the whole approach to open science initially was, what would be one big way that we could impact all areas of neuroscience? So the first 10 years of the Institute, they put together a plan to map the expression of all the potential genes that could be expressed throughout the brain, throughout the mouse brain, throughout the spinal cord. They began to work their way through different systems, and then to begin to step into the human brain and go back in time to the developing mouse brain and the developing human brain. So it's kind of like coming up with all the parts that you need to make something work. And once you know what the parts are, it's a lot easier to figure out how something works. So what the Allen Institute did in its first 10 years was provide the parts, all the different components that you'd need to work with like a Lego system, to build a part of the brain and understand what its components are and how it works. So the tools that we provided at that moment in time were big data and open data. And we were able to do that because we had the scientists to map the genes. We had imaging people to be able to develop high throughput ways to capture the images of where those genes are expressed. And we had a technology group that was then able to visualize what that looked like in 3D, in online tools, and use their expertise to develop ways that people who aren't experts could access all that data and begin to overlay it on top of their own research questions. So the reputation of the Institute was built during that 10 years from a fairly small operation initially here in Seattle that has grown so significantly that now we have an additional phase of funding and a brand new building that's going up at the corner of Westlake and Mercer that is absolutely stunning and purpose-built for the kind of science that we do, which is open, integrative, interactive, and very team-driven. It's not trivial to take people of very different training backgrounds and teach them the things they need to know to play well in the sandpit and work well with others. So that's an evolving thing too. It started with the mapping of genes, and now in the second 10 years of funding, we've been lucky enough that our founder put an enormous amount of faith in a much more ambitious program, not just to come up with components, but to figure out how the brain works by having an understanding of those components and using brand new technologies to actually visualize the brain in action, and use a lot of the technologies that we will be hoping to partner with the local tech organizations to really begin to tease apart, simulate, and understand. So coming here at this moment in time was, without being too witty, a real no-brainer. The Allen Institute has pretty much led the whole idea of open data and using funding and cutting-edge technologies to put data out there for others to be able to use, ahead of many other organizations, ahead of many other countries. Now we're at this incredibly exciting time in brain research where big brain projects are happening. The what's commonly referred to as the Obama Brain Initiative here in the US is following a very similar trajectory, but just using obviously funding mechanisms and synergistic mechanisms across multiple organizations, not just housed within the same one, and we work very closely with them. But there's also the Human Brain Project in Europe, with which we're also collaborating. And we've recently been approached by the big brain projects in China and Japan. We're already working with Israel and Australia, not necessarily to collaborate with them directly on doing their research, although there is some of that, but to collaborate with them on helping them develop user interfaces that will make what they're doing more accessible to the people who are already using our tools. So we're at this incredible point right now, not just about to move into an awesome new building, but where we get to kind of be the hub of all of this worldwide open data, big brain activity. So we may be this relatively small operation here in Seattle, but we're growing very rapidly, not just in people, but also in how we use our science to impact. And that was what drew me here. That next phase of not just doing team science, big data, and open science, but how we create impact to improve the lives of other people is a huge question from all of this data. And we're going to have to work with a lot of other people to do that.
Well, it's very exciting to know that this is all happening right down in South Lake Union, right here in Washington State, and we're very happy to have you here helping to lead that effort.
It's a big job, but it's a very exciting one. Part of the reason for being at a meeting like this is we do live in a world where everybody out there in the international neuroscience community knows about the Allen Institute for Brain Science and what we're doing. And yet we're still a bit of a mystery on our front doorstep. So a big part of my job is also to fix that, to really begin to set up the relationships, get to know what's happening here locally, and begin to see where meaningful interactions can begin. We're really hoping that once our building is open, because we're spread around 4 different buildings right now, we really will have an open door for people to be able to come in and not just see what we're doing, learn about the brain, come to our seminars when we have them, host local events so that people can learn more about what's happening in different areas of brain research, work more closely with UW, work more closely with the Hutch. It's a wonderful time to be in a place like this. And building those local relationships is just as important as the international ones.
I couldn't agree more. So thank you for being here on the interview. This has been Jane Roskams, who is the Executive Director of Strategy and Alliance at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
I'm Alexis Holzer from Washington State University and WBBA. Thank you for watching.